Chicago breathes beauty by day and bleeds terror by night. Police have walked into freezers, hiding severed limbs, trains soaked in blood, mansions riddled with bullet holes, and quiet bedrooms turned into slaughter scenes. Behind every wall of calm lies a storm of rage, betrayal, and cruelty. Decades behind bars await the killers, yet the echoes of their victims still haunt the city's nights forever. And this is Inside Chicago's Darkest Black Killers, Shocking Murders, and True Crime Documentary. Welcome back to Justice Reversed, where real crimes meet real justice. Number 1. Sandra Kolalou. A landlord vanished overnight. What police uncovered inside her tenant's freezer stunned the entire city of Chicago. Sandra Kolalou, a 36-year-old tenant, had been living in a home owned by 69-year-old Frances Walker, a beloved piano teacher and church musician. Their relationship, once cordial, soured when Walker served her an eviction notice. Police later said that a single piece of paper may have triggered a deadly confrontation. In the early hours of the 10th of October 2022, tenants awoke to terrified cries. When they texted and called their landlord, the replies they received were unsettlingly mechanical. Hours passed, without a sign of Frances. By evening, panic set in. The tenants called Chicago police and warned officers they were afraid of Kolalou. When officers arrived, Kolalou was leaving the property. She had ordered a tow truck, paid for with Walker's credit card, to take her to Foster Beach. Suspicious, tenants exchanged phone numbers with the driver, who later told them that Kolalou had dumped a large bag in a trash bin near the lake. Inside that bin, police found bloody rags and linens. It was enough to obtain a warrant for a second search of the house. What detectives found inside still haunts even seasoned investigators. In the kitchen freezer lay Frances Walker's dismembered remains, her head, arms, and legs. Her torso was missing. The first-floor bedroom showed signs of a violent struggle. Large butcher knives, blood traces, and Walker's belongings painted a picture of brutality driven by rage. Kolalou was arrested at the beach after threatening the tow truck driver with a knife, though her defense later contested that claim. She refused to cooperate with investigators and invoked her right to remain silent. But forensic evidence began to close in. DNA on the discarded bag matched Kolalou, and surveillance footage placed her at every critical point. This was not random, said Chicago Police Chief of Detectives Brendan Dejean. It was deliberate and deeply disturbing. At her 6-day trial in April 2024, prosecutors argued she killed her landlord to avoid eviction, then used her credit cards and tried to conceal the body. The defense insisted she was framed and declared Sandra was like family to Fran. The jury didn't agree. They found her guilty on all counts: first-degree murder, dismemberment, and aggravated identity theft. In July 2024, Judge Ursula Wolowski sentenced Kolalou to 58 years in prison, calling the case something out of a horror movie. Standing before the court, Kolalou showed no emotion. "I did not commit this crime," she said softly. "With God as my witness, I never harmed Fran." Loved by neighbors and family, Frances Walker was remembered for her kindness, faith, and music that once filled every home. Crimes like this remind us to stay alert to warning signs of escalating conflict, to check on loved ones when something feels off, and to report suspicious behavior immediately. Hesitation can cost lives. Justice delivered peace, but not healing. Trust, once broken by violence, leaves silence where music once played. Before moving on, if this truth hits you, press hype, stand with the forgotten, amplify justice, and make sure silence never buries the voices of the lost. Number 2. Jordan Hill, Tesfaye Cooper, Brittany Covington, and Tanishia Covington. It began as a reunion between old acquaintances and ended as one of the most disturbing crimes ever broadcast online. On New Year's Eve 2016, an white man with developmental disabilities was dropped off by his parents at a McDonald's in the Chicago suburbs. He thought he was meeting a friend, Jordan Hill, a familiar face from high school. Instead, Hill arrived in a stolen van and drove the victim into the city's west side, where over the next 3 days he would be humiliated, beaten, and tortured while the world watched on Facebook Live. By the 3rd of January 2017, Hill and his friend Tesfaye Cooper brought the victim to an apartment belonging to sisters Brittany and Tanishia Covington. What began as horseplay escalated into a nightmare. The four tied the victim with cords, beat him, slashed his scalp with a knife, and forced him to drink from a toilet. Brittany streamed parts of the torture live on Facebook. Viewers could hear racial slurs and chants of F. White people and F. Trump, as the terrified young man, bound and bleeding, was ordered to repeat the phrases. The video showed him being mocked and kicked as his clothes were cut off. At one point, the attackers demanded $300 in ransom from his mother. The ordeal lasted nearly 48 hours. It ended only when a downstairs neighbor, alarmed by the noise, threatened to call the police. As two of the perpetrators went to confront the neighbor, the victim escaped, wandering the streets barefoot and dazed. Officer Michael Donnelly spotted him hours later, shivering in winter air, his clothing torn and bloody. He looked terrified, the officer recalled. Investigators from both Streamwood and Chicago police quickly traced the viral Facebook video. Superintendent Eddie Johnson called it reprehensible, adding, "Even after 28 years on the job, it shocks me what people are capable of." Within hours, all four suspects were in custody. They were charged with aggravated kidnapping, hate crime, unlawful restraint, and battery with a deadly weapon. He'll also face charges for robbery and possession of a stolen vehicle. Prosecutors cited the racial slurs and targeting of the victim's mental disability as clear evidence of a hate crime. By 2018, all four had accepted plea deals. Brittany Covington received 4 years of probation, her sister Tanishia, 3 years in prison, Tesfaye Cooper, 7 years, and Jordan Hill, 8 years. Judge William Hooks defended the probation ruling, saying, "I'm not sure prison would make her any better." The case ignited national outrage. Then President Barack Obama called it despicable, noting it exposed long-standing divisions in America. The hashtag BLM kidnapping spread rapidly, though investigators found no link to any movement. This crime left lasting lessons. Never underestimate the dangers of online glorification of violence. Remember that hate in any direction dehumanizes both victim and perpetrator. And recognize that silence from bystanders online or in life can prolong cruelty. In the end, the Facebook Live torture case revealed how the camera meant to expose truth instead captured humanity's darkest reflection. Number 3. Andre Crawford. He attended community safety meetings, applauded detectives hunting a serial killer, without anyone realizing he was the man they were looking for. Andre Crawford, born in Chicago in 1962, was once a familiar face on the city's south side. Neighbors saw him as a drifter who did odd jobs, sometimes handing out advice about staying safe from predators. In truth, he was the predator. Between 1993 and 1999, Crawford murdered 11 women, mostly black women struggling with addiction or working the streets of Inglewood. He offered them drugs or money, then strangled or stabbed them when they resisted. Later, he would return to the abandoned buildings where their bodies lay, committing acts too disturbing for many detectives to describe aloud. The murders continued for 6 years. Bodies kept turning up in vacant lots and derelict houses, and Chicago police struggled to identify a single suspect. What they didn't know was that Crawford was mingling with them at neighborhood watch meetings, pretending to support Operation Safe Passage, a program meant to protect local children from violence. In November 1999, a woman named Katrina Martin, a recovering addict, grew uneasy after Crawford spoke with chilling casualness about strangling women and smashing their heads in. Her tip, along with 2 others, led detectives to request a DNA sample. The results matched evidence from multiple murder scenes. On January 28, 2000, Andre Crawford was arrested. During 3 days of interrogation, Crawford confessed to 11 murders and an attempted murder. "I was glad I was caught," he told investigators. "I was like a shark in a pool." He showed no remorse, only exhaustion. One victim, Claudia Robinson, had survived by pretending to be dead after he beat her with a plank of wood on Thanksgiving night in 1997. Her testimony helped prosecutors build their case. Crawford's trial did not begin until 2009, delayed by court errors and the moratorium on Illinois' death penalty. Prosecutors called him the South Side Strangler and described his acts as methodical and predatory. The defense argued he was a damaged man, a child of neglect and abuse. But on the 10th of December 2009, a jury found him guilty on all counts. 8 days later, he was sentenced to life in prison, without parole after 2 jurors blocked the death penalty. As the sentence was read, witnesses saw him smile faintly, a gesture that enraged the victims' families. Relatives demanded harsher justice. "He took 11 lives," one sister said, "and gets to keep his own." Survivor Claudia Robinson, in tears, called him a monster. "The system let live better than me." Andre Crawford died in prison in 2017 from liver cancer. This case forced Illinois to confront how gaps in forensic policy can cost lives. Crawford had multiple felony arrests before his DNA was ever collected. It reminds us to trust evidence, push for reform, and never assume evil looks a certain way. Justice can be delayed, but when it comes, it exposes everything that hid in plain sight. Number 4. Rhanni S. Davis. It was Labor Day morning, quiet and cold, when a Chicago commuter train became the scene of one of the city's deadliest random shootings. At 5:30 a.m. on the 2nd of September 2024, passengers on the CTA Blue Line were asleep as the train rolled through Oak Park. Among them was 30-year-old Rhanni S. Davis, carrying a black North Face bag and a 9mm Glock pistol. Surveillance footage would later show Davis pacing between two cars before raising the weapon and firing at 4 sleeping passengers, execution style. There were no words, no argument. The victims never saw their killer. Prosecutors said 3 were shot in one car and the 4th in the next. All were hit at close range, each bullet precise and final. When the train reached Harlem Station, one terrified witness jumped off to escape. Davis exited moments later and disappeared into the early morning fog. At 5:27 a.m., CTA staff at the Forest Park Terminal discovered 3 lifeless passengers aboard. A 4th, gravely wounded, was rushed to Loyola University Medical Center but died shortly after. The victims, 60-year-old Adrian Collins, 28-year-old Simeon Behesi, 64-year-old Margaret Johnson, and 52-year-old Sean Jones, had boarded the train for shelter or routine travel. None made it home. Within an hour, the shooter returned to the system, boarding another train toward downtown. A sharp-eyed CTA employee at California Station recognized Davis from a security alert and quietly called police. By 6:52 a.m., officers arrested Davis without incident. The weapon, a Glock 43, matched the 6 shell casings found at the scene. Investigators quickly learned this wasn't Davis's first encounter with law enforcement. Over a decade, Davis had been arrested multiple times for weapons-related charges that were later dropped. Despite holding state-issued security and firearms instructor credentials, Davis lacked a valid gun owner identification card or concealed carry license. "It's a tragic failure of oversight," one official told reporters. "Someone with that record should never have been armed." Charged with 4 counts of first-degree murder, Davis was denied pretrial release. Cook County State's Attorney Kim Fox said, "The motive may never be known. Authorities believe the victims were chosen at random." Public outrage followed. Forest Park Mayor Rory Hoskins called it a horrific and inexplicable act of violence. CTA President Dorval Carter condemned it as something that should never happen in a civilized city. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker demanded answers about how a system with 33,000 cameras and millions in annual security funding could still fail to protect its riders. Advocates for the homeless community warned the tragedy revealed how vulnerable people sleeping on public transit had become. From this tragedy come lessons too urgent to ignore: remain alert in public spaces, trust your instincts when danger feels near, and demand stronger oversight of armed security licensing to prevent deadly lapses. 4 innocent lives ended before sunrise, a reminder that in a city full of movement, silence can be the sound of something gone terribly wrong. Number 5. Daries Stanford, Dejean Thompkins, and Dontae Williams. They came to Los Angeles for a weekend of music, laughter, and sunlight, but the night ended in gunfire and chaos. In the early morning hours of the 28th of January 2023, 3 women from the Chicago area sat inside a parked car outside a rented Beverly Crest mansion, unaware that a blue Tesla was creeping up the street toward them. Within seconds, more than 30 rounds tore through the quiet neighborhood. When the smoke cleared, 33-year-old Ayanna Hutton, 29-year-old Nena Davis, and 26-year-old Destiny Sims were dead. 4 others were wounded. It was the 6th mass shooting in California in just 13 days. Investigators soon identified 3 suspects: Daries Stanford, 28, Dejean Thompkins, 28, and Dontae Williams, 22, all alleged members of a Chicago street gang. Detectives believe the women were not the intended targets, but rather collateral victims of an ongoing dispute that had crossed state lines. They were innocent, LAPD Captain Jonathan Tippett said. They just happened to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. The victims had flown to Los Angeles to support a Chicago rapper performing nearby. They had rented a $3 million vacation home in one of the city's most secure neighborhoods, surrounded by manicured lawns and luxury cars. Yet, as they returned from a late-night bowling outing, they were ambushed before even stepping out of their vehicle. Police used surveillance footage to trace the attacker's blue Tesla, identified by a damaged fender and missing license plates. Public tips led detectives to an apartment on Wilshire Boulevard in Beverly Hills. Though the suspects had fled, forensic evidence tied them to the scene. A deeper look revealed something darker. One suspect, Thompkins, was already wanted in connection with another Chicago-linked murder in North Hollywood just weeks earlier. The manhunt stretched across states. Thompkins was arrested in Chicago on April 10, Williams and Gary, Indiana days later, and Stanford in Manhattan on May 10. Each faced extradition to Los Angeles. Prosecutors charged them with multiple counts of murder, attempted murder, and assault with a semi-automatic firearm. Thompkins faced an additional count for the earlier North Hollywood killing. Under California's special circumstance laws, they could face life in prison without parole. District Attorney George Gascon called the case another example of the widespread damage that can be done by gun violence. The fact that gang disputes from Chicago could erupt in the hills above Beverly Hills unsettled even hardened investigators. Violence doesn't respect zip codes, one detective said. The tragedy reignited debate over gun access and the spread of gang-related violence across states. It also prompted renewed demands for stronger interstate coordination among law enforcement agencies and stricter background checks on firearm purchases. This case reminds viewers to stay cautious when traveling or sharing locations online, to remain alert even in safe neighborhoods, and to remember that danger can follow beyond city limits. 3 women died far from home, a grim reminder that violence has no borders and peace has no guarantees. Number 6. Keshia Golden. It began with something ordinary, a late-night argument over a microwave, and ended with the death of a father. In the early morning of the 23rd of October 2022, Chicago police were called to a home in the Austin neighborhood. Inside, they found 30-year-old Calvin Sidney bleeding from a single stab wound to his thigh. His girlfriend, 33-year-old Keshia Golden, 8 months pregnant with his child, had fled but soon returned. Hours earlier, the couple had celebrated their baby shower surrounded by family. Now, the same home was a crime scene. According to prosecutors, the argument began around 3 a.m. when the couple fought over who would use the microwave first. Golden allegedly knocked a plate of food from Sidney's hands. He pushed her, and relatives intervened to separate them. Sidney went to the bedroom to cool off. But Golden, still angry, followed, this time carrying a kitchen knife. As Sidney's uncle tried to stop her, she reached around him and stabbed Sidney once in the leg, severing his femoral artery. He died before doctors could save him. Police reports revealed this was not the couple's first violent confrontation. Between June and September 2022, 5 domestic abuse complaints had been filed. In most, Sidney was listed as the aggressor. Golden once obtained a restraining order after he allegedly punched her in the face. In another incident, she reportedly stabbed him in the neck, though Sidney declined to press charges. Prosecutors said the relationship was toxic but tightly bound, a cycle of love and violence that ended in tragedy. After the stabbing, Golden told officers she had gone to the bedroom to argue, not to kill. Her public defender, Julie Kohler, argued she acted in self-defense after being dragged by her hair and pinned down. She did what any terrified pregnant woman would do, Kohler said. Golden, who had previously suffered a miscarriage due to alleged abuse, broke down in tears during questioning and confessed she stabbed Sidney during a fight. Initially charged with first-degree murder, Golden was held on a $2 million bond. But Judge Mary Marubio later reduced it to $50,000, citing Illinois law that discourages pretrial incarceration for pregnant women. It is in the best interest of the unborn child, the judge said. The Chicago Community Bond Fund paid her $5,000 deposit, and she was released pending trial. Public reaction was divided. Advocates for domestic violence survivors defended Golden, arguing her case exposed the failures of systems meant to protect abused women. Others questioned how someone accused of murder could walk free before giving birth. Golden's mother told reporters she didn't mean to kill him. She didn't know a wound to the leg could take a life. This case underscores vital lessons. Unresolved domestic violence escalates fast. Knowing when to walk away saves lives, and silence in abuse only deepens tragedy. Justice may determine guilt, but violence inside the home always leaves two victims, the one buried and the one left behind. Number 7. Michael Ward and Kenneth Williams. She had just marched in Washington, smiling beneath the winter sky as part of President Obama's inauguration celebration. A week later, she was gone. Hadia Pendleton, an honor student and majorette at King College Prep in Chicago, was shot and killed on the 29th of January 2013, only a mile from the Obama family's home. What began as a group of teens seeking shelter from the rain in Vivian Gordon Harsh Park turned into a tragedy that would shock a nation. The gunman was Michael Ward, and the getaway driver was 20-year-old Kenneth Williams, both members of a Chicago gang. According to prosecutors, they were out for revenge. Months earlier, Williams had been shot in a separate attack. On that afternoon, believing they had spotted rival gang members, they circled the park in a white sedan. Ward jumped out, ran toward the group, and opened fire. Hadia was hit in the back. She fell to the ground as her friends screamed for help. 2 other teens were wounded, but survived. She was in the wrong place at the wrong time, said Chicago Police Superintendent Gary McCarthy. Ward later confessed, telling investigators she had nothing to do with it. Detectives relied on hours of surveillance footage and witness statements to track the vehicle used in the shooting. A crucial lead came from an earlier police stop involving the same white car with Ward inside. Both suspects were arrested on the 11th of February 2013. Ward faced 141 counts of murder. Each pleaded not guilty. At the time of the shooting, Ward was already on probation for unlawful firearm possession, a conviction that had carried no prison time. For police, it was proof of a broken system. If the courts had kept him in, McCarthy said, Hadia Pendleton would be alive today. The trial began in August 2018. Over several emotional weeks, jurors heard testimony from surviving friends and forensic experts. Ward's videotaped confession was played in court. Kenneth Williams was convicted first, followed by Ward a day later. Ward received an 84-year prison sentence, Williams, 42 years. But in a twist years later, an appellate court overturned Ward's conviction, ruling that his right to counsel had been violated. He remains in custody, awaiting retrial. Hadia's death drew international attention. First Lady Michelle Obama attended her funeral, and her parents were guests at the State of the Union address, where her name became a symbol of the fight against gun violence. She was our heartbeat, her father said, his voice breaking. The case reignited national debate over illegal gun possession, with Chicago officials demanding tougher penalties and universal background checks. It highlighted the gap between justice on paper and justice in practice. Her story serves as a warning that retaliation never heals, that guns in the wrong hands destroy futures, and that silence in communities plagued by fear allows tragedy to repeat. Hadia Pendleton's smile once lit a parade. Today, it lights a call for change. Number 8. William Balfour. It was a quiet Friday morning in Chicago's Englewood neighborhood when a family home became the center of one of the city's most shocking crimes. On the 24th of October, 2008, Jennifer Hudson's world collapsed. Her mother, Darnell Donnerson, her brother, Jason Hudson, and her nephew, Julian King, were all murdered. The man responsible was someone the family already knew, William Balfour, Jennifer's former brother-in-law. Prosecutors described him as a jealous and violent man who could not accept that his estranged wife, Julia Hudson, had moved on. Balfour and Julia had separated earlier that year. Friends said his obsession turned threatening. "If you leave me, I'll kill your family first," he warned her. The morning after Julia's birthday, Balfour arrived at her family's home and saw balloons from her new boyfriend. Enraged, he destroyed them and stormed out, only to return moments later with a .45 caliber handgun. Inside the house, Hudson's mother, Darnell, was shot in the back as she tried to defend herself. Her son Jason was executed in his bedroom. Balfour then forced Julian King into Jason's white SUV and drove away. 3 days later, police found the abandoned vehicle on Chicago's west side. Julian had been shot multiple times in the head. When Julia discovered the bodies of her mother and brother, she called 911 in terror, naming one suspect, William. He did this. Balfour was arrested that same day for violating his parole. He had already served 7 years for attempted murder and hijacking. Detectives built their case through meticulous evidence work. Balfour's cell phone records placed him near the Hudson home at the time of the murders, and again near the area where Julian's body was found hours later. Gunshot residue was found on his car's steering wheel, and witnesses placed a distinctive chrome and black pistol, later identified as the murder weapon, in his hands. When police arrested him, he had the keys to the stolen SUV. The trial began in 2012, with Jennifer Hudson taking the stand first. The defense claimed Balfour was being framed, insisting there was no DNA evidence tying him to the crime. But after 2 days of deliberation, the jury found him guilty of all charges. On the 24th of July 2012, Judge Charles Burns sentenced Balfour to 3 consecutive life sentences without parole, calling him a man with a soul as barren as dark space. His appeals were denied, and the Supreme Court refused to hear his case. The Hudson family's grief became a national story. Jennifer attended every hearing, later saying the pain never faded. Former prosecutor James McKay noted that Balfour was lucky Illinois had abolished the death penalty before trial, otherwise, he likely would have faced execution. This case left behind hard truths. Jealousy turns deadly when control replaces love, warning signs ignored can become tragedy, and violence inside families destroys generations. Even years later, the Hudson murders remain a haunting reminder that rage can silence 3 lives and reshape countless others forever. From Chicago to California, these women's stories expose the darkest corners of American true crime, where jealousy, obsession, and vengeance collide with fate. Each case is more than a headline, it's a warning written in blood. If you want to keep uncovering the truth behind America's most chilling crimes, don't just scroll away. Subscribe to Justice Reversed and hit the notification bell so you never miss the next drop. Because every case we tell reminds us, justice isn't guaranteed, but silence always protects the wrong side.